time for our meeting to begin. We have one more guest coming in here. Okay, Mark, could you mark who's attending, please?
Yes, sir.
All right. We have the minutes from last meeting in front of us. Need a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Mr. Stewart, could you call the first case of the evening, please?
Yes, sir. Our first case today is from Ms. Jennifer Hendrick, who's an agent for Enterprise Company, who is filed an appeal of the zoning minister's decision / interpretation on the use of the reference properties, which is going to be 644 to 650 Donaldson Road and 3533 Cherry Tree Lane. The appeal today is for the properties of 644 to 650 Donaldson Road and 3533 Cherry Tree Lane. And the application was to appeal the zoning administrator's decision / interpretation on the use of the reference properties for the rental of small to medium size box trucks. This site is located on Donaldson Road between Houston Road and Cherry Tree Lane and is currently vacant. The adjoining properties contain a medical office building, a used car sales lot, a convenience store with fuel pumps, a bank, and multiple single-family residences. The subject property, the medical office building, the used car sales lot, and the convenience store are within the highway commercial zone. The bank is within the commercial 2 zone in Boone County, and the single-family residences are within the residential compact subdivision zone. The highway's commercial zone intent is to recognize the unique aspects of commercial uses commonly found along highway corridors and promote coordinated quality development in these areas. Uses in this district may range in scale and intensity, but are typically automobile-oriented and seek high visibility. As such, it is important to properly plan circulation and parking areas, signage, landscaping, and other site features. The highway commercial zone allows a variety of commercial, institutional, lodging, and recreational uses with associated accessory uses. Motor vehicle sales and rental is listed as a permitted use. Per Direction 2030, which is the area-wide comprehensive plan update, which was adopted by the Kent County Planning Commission in September of 2014, the recommended land use plan identifies the reference site as well as the medical office building, used car sales lot, and convenience store properties for commercial uses, and the single-family residence properties for residential uses with a density of 4.1 to 7.0 dwelling units per net acre. The applicant is proposing to open a business that has car sales, car rental, and truck rental components. Motor vehicle sales and rental is defined in the Erlanger Zoning Ordinance as an industry group comprising establishments primarily engaged in retailing new and used automobiles and light trucks, such as sport utility vehicles and passenger and cargo vans. The Erlanger Zoning Ordinance Section 4.05C states that all motor vehicle sales and rental uses shall meet the following regulations and standards. 1, the vehicles for sale, lease, or rental may be displayed in the front yard, provided no vehicle shall be displayed within 15 feet of the street right-of-way. 2, display areas must be shown on the site plan. And 3, all new display areas shall be paved with an all-weather hard surface material such as concrete, asphalt, paver, or comparable material. The Erlanger Zoning Ordinance Section 4.02 states that the zoning administrator shall make determinations as to whether any proposed use is permitted within the City of Erlanger zoning district based on the uses listed in Section 4.04, Table of Uses. When it is not clear whether a proposed use is or is not permitted, the zoning administrator shall consult the purpose statement for each district and the latest version of the North American Industrial Classification System, NAICS, to help decide. If any use not specifically listed in Section 4.04 Table of Uses and any proposed use not substantially similar to a listed use as determined by the zoning administrator after consultation shall be deemed to be prohibited. NAICS lists truck rental under the real estate and rental and leasing category. Mini warehouse personal storage is the closest match of a similar classification listed as a permitted use and is only permitted in the flex industrial zone. The categories under the NAICS code of 4238 are construction, mining, except oil well, machinery, and equipment merchant wholesalers, farm and garden machinery and equipment merchant wholesalers, industrial machinery and equipment merchant wholesalers, industrial supply merchant wholesalers, service established equipment and supplies merchant wholesalers, and transportation equipment and supplies, except motor vehicles merchant wholesalers. The attached site plan shows the location of the truck storage spaces, which is in the purple, at the corner of Cherry Tree Lane and Rodeo Drive. The Erlanger Zoning Ordinance Section 7.07 requires a 30-feet wide buffer yard with 5 trees, 50% must be evergreen, and 8 medium or large shrubs, which 75% of those need to be dense evergreen for every 1,000 square feet of buffer yard, or a 15-foot wide buffer yard with a 6-foot tall solid fence with 3 trees, 50% evergreen, and 4 medium or large shrubs, 75% dense evergreen, between the proposed use and single-family residence properties. The Erlanger Zoning Ordinance Section 7.07 requires perimeter landscaping within 5 feet of the property lines. 1 medium tree and 2 large shrubs are required for every 50 feet of property lines. The staff recommendation is to deny the appeal, and the supporting information is that the car wash, motor vehicle service major, and motor vehicle sales and rental uses are businesses that a person could expect to find at a typical highway exit, and Donaldson Road exit is a prime example, with it being the closest exit to the intersection of 2 major highways, I-71, I-75, and I-275, and being close to the airport. The NAICS website has determined that the truck rental is a similar business to many warehouse personal storage rentals, and the Erlanger Council decided that these uses would not fit into the highway commercial zone in Erlanger. The truck rental and many warehouse personal storage uses are permitted in the flex industrial zone, which is located in 3 areas in Erlanger. We have one at the end of Holly Lane, Crescent Avenue near Silver Lake Park, and on Crescent Springs Drive near the Northern Kentucky Water District.
All right, thank you. So our purpose here tonight is to establish, we already have the zoning established in this area. It's an interpretation of the zoning as to whether the box trucks, basically, are allowed in this area. So we will take some testimony from everyone. Anyone who wishes to speak for or against, please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Okay. We're going to start off this evening with Enterprise during their presentation to let us know what they have in mind for the area.
Okay. Chairman, may I approach?
So good evening. My name is Tim Tyson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Strauss Troy. My office is in the River Center building down in Covington. I've been retained to represent a company called EAN, which is Enterprise Car Rental. With me tonight, I've got Jennifer Hendricks. Her name is the one that's on the appeal form. That's the lady sitting here. And then I've also got with her Chris Minnick, both of them from EAN. Jennifer is involved with property management and site development, that type of thing. And Chris is the one that's the truck rental manager, okay? I've got a few different handouts, so I'm going to kind of go through a few different points with you. the site is supposed to look like, all right? And then, Mark, the appeal that we sent in, have they had that yet? Okay, all right, so I won't bother giving you another one. Does anybody need a copy of the actual form that we filed, or do you have that with you?
We have it.
You have it, okay,
Copies,
all right. I wasn't sure if those would be there, so I thought I'd make a copy. So we're appealing this, in short, because all of the uses that enterprise would want to make of this site are permitted except for one, okay? In the judgment of Mr. Stewart. Their car rental is allowed, their car sales is allowed, their car wash is allowed, the office is allowed, maintenance and service and fueling of the cars there is allowed, cleaning of the cars there is allowed. In fact, they are, and even city would agree, they are allowed to rent and sell light trucks. The issue is the definition of light truck, okay? So that's really the only issue tonight, except for one other one, and that is that I'm going to give you some information that indicates that the number of trucks that they'll have on the site is really, really low. So there's actually another basis that you guys can grant enterprise what they need, and that is to determine that their truck rental operation is an accessory use. So an accessory use is something that is that supports the primary use, but it's not one of the primary uses, okay? So there's actually two different things I'm going to talk to you about tonight. One of them has to do with this accessory use concept. The other one relates mostly to this definition of light truck, okay? So that's mostly what my presentation is going to be about tonight. I'll mention to you that in the staff report, there were several comments made relating to setbacks, landscaping, that type of thing, access into the site. And I'll just tell you, for purpose of this meeting, all of those issues are moot because the applicant has not asked this board or the city to waive any of those requirements. So a site plan to give the city an idea of what was going to be built there was presented. It wasn't intended to be the absolute final draft. It was a preliminary one for purposes of appreciating and understanding how they were going to use the site. So we don't need to worry about that, and the applicant here is prepared to meet all of the requirements of the city with regard to the setbacking and the landscaping and that type of thing, okay? So those are kind of a non-issue. All right. So the first thing I guess I'm going to hand out to you here is a sheet that explains
Could you do me I get you to do one thing? Could you, amongst the folks that are
Sure.
interested or living
We'd need this
close to
many,
here,
but,
could you?
I do have a few extras, so if you can pass those around.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this is to describe for you what kind of trucks Enterprise would rent here and why we feel like it fits within the definition of light truck. So I'm going to start with that. So Enterprise disagrees with Mr. Stewart because they believe that the trucks that they would rent are light trucks within the definition that's included in the ordinance. I'll also tell you that the term light trucks is not defined in the ordinance, okay? So, but the city has made an opinion here that the kind of trucks that Enterprise proposes to rent are not light trucks, which is why we're here tonight. If they had said, oh yeah, those are light trucks, we wouldn't be here. We'd be permitted. So I go through this list just to give you an idea. So the kind of trucks that they have are, they do not require a commercial driver's license to rent them. They only have one axle. By the way, if you're as crazy as I am, I had to ask them, one axle, why doesn't the front of the truck then rub? Well, it's considered a one axle truck if it's the ones in the back. The front one doesn't count. So they're a one axle truck because it's the one behind the driver. These trucks all have automatic transmissions. They do not detach from their trailers. This next sentence I actually have a correction on. I said on there they have disc brakes, not air brakes. They actually do not have trailer brakes. They only have the brakes in the main, on the main axle. And so They could potentially have air brakes, but they're not the kind of like loud air brakes like you would expect to hear on a semi out on the interstate. These are trucks that can be driven by consumers, so even an inexperienced driver can drive these. Any one of us could go over there and rent one of these kinds of trucks and drive it. And they don't, so they're not semis. They're not the big trucks. And if you had a yard in which you were going to store and drive 18-wheelers on them all the time, especially if they were loaded down, you have to have special paving, special thickness of concrete in that for heavy-duty trucks. These are not, these trucks do not require any kind of heavy-duty paving, okay? So that's with the definition of light truck not being included in the ordinance, we feel like the trucks that they would rent are light trucks. They're not heavy trucks. They're not even medium-sized trucks. They are light-duty trucks. Interesting, by the way, light truck is the term. It doesn't talk about how big the truck could be. So theoretically, if you could make a truck out of really, really light material, you can make it really, really big, and it might still qualify as a light truck. Okay? It's more about the weight of the truck, not the size of the truck. That's important when we talk about a couple of ththings later. So the next thing I'm going to do, I didn't bother running you all off a copy of this, but I just want to show you this. I printed out, so you guys have a new zoning ordinance in Erlanger that's just been adopted. Did you guys know that? And this is brand new. The new ordinance is only a month old, 2 months old, something like that. In that zoning ordinance, they could have solved this problem if they had defined light trucks. So just to give you an idea, this is the definitions section of the new Erlanger zoning ordinance. I printed it out. It's 43 pages long, and they're all in alphabetical order. And it literally starts with defining the word abutting, and it goes for 43 pages. Some of it, by the way, there are some pictures on it, which probably adds a little bit to the length of it. But there's 43 pages of definitions. Nowhere in here is the term light truck defined. Now that's kind of important because the staff for you is making a determination that the trucks that Enterprise wants to park on this lot and rent from there are not light trucks, but there's no standard in here for what's a heavy truck, what's a light truck, what's a medium truck. It's not defined anywhere in here. And they could have if they had had a definition in there that we wouldn't be here tonight. Okay? All right, I'm going to make one more point about the use. So I've talked to the people at my client, and by the way, I'm going to report this to you. Any of them are happy to come up and confirm or answer questions that you might have about what they do. The trucks I've described for you, we'll call them a box truck for lack of a better word. They have some of these facilities, enterprises into this already around the country. And so of the lots where they already have truck rental, there are usually only about 6 to 8 box trucks on the lot out of well over 100 vehicles. So if there were 100 vehicles, 92 to 94 of them would be cars, and 6 to 8 of them might be these box trucks. If the business thrives, if it grows more than what it has, they might get to 10 someday, or maybe even as high as 20 trucks on the lot at a maximum. But even at that point, there's going to be 80 or more cars and maybe 10 or even as high as 20 trucks on the lot. Now, the point I'll make to you is we have this phraseology in all the zoning ordinances that allows for accessory uses. There's a definition about that I'm going to go into in a minute. This small of a concept within their development plan is small enough that you guys could decide, yeah, well, that's just an accessory thing. In fact, the reason that they rent trucks is because over the years, they've rented cars for years, and they've gotten more and more of their regular customers have called and said, hey, I need to move some product from here to there. Do you guys rent trucks? It could be used, by the way, on a consumer basis for just moving from one house to another, putting the furniture in, that type of thing. And so they've gotten into where they do a few of these trucks just to satisfy the need, and it's more convenient for their customers to be able to come to Enterprise and get a truck instead of just a car. And that's the reason why they do it. So the truck rental is sort of an accessory use of the main use, which is the car rental, okay? Now, I'm going to get something. I've given, what I'm about to give to you, I've already given to legal counsel for you. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I don't necessarily expect you to absorb tonight all of these 4 pages. What I've done on the first page, though, is I've kind of listed out some of the legal principles about how zoning ordinances are supposed to be interpreted and enforced. And what I've done on pages 2, 3, and 4 is cited to Kentucky cases over the years where the principles, the 7 principles on the first page kind of come from, okay? And those last 3 pages are really more so that Jack Atlin can look at them and confirm for you guys if you have any doubt about that. But these legal principles are sort of important. It kind of seems weird. You probably guys have never probably had some lawyer stand up at the podium and read you law to you. But it's important in this case for you to understand when you're interpreting a zoning ordinance like this, what the kind of the legal requirements are. So like, there's this rule, I'm going to read the first one. Zoning regulations are in derogation of the common law and deprive a property owner of certain uses of their property. All right, that's what a zoning ordinance does. It says that people that own property can't use it for certain things. And as such, it must be strictly construed. This, by the way, is a principle of law that's been cited in probably 20 or 30 cases in Kentucky over the years. Any restrictions in the zoning resolutions that will not be extended by the courts to include limitations not clearly prescribed. All right? So that's an underlying legal principle that says that you're not allowed to strictly enforce a language in a zoning ordinance unless it's actually in it. Okay? So I'm going to go through the rest of these. So like number 2 says that the zoning ordinance should not be extended by implication. So in other words, you're not allowed to read a zoning ordinance and say, well, it doesn't actually say this, but it implies blah, blah, blah. You're not allowed to imply things in a zoning ordinance. It has to actually be stated because you're telling people what they can't use for their property. So the zoning ordinance has to say what you're not allowed to do. All right? The third thing is that a zoning ordinance must contain standards. All right? And so in this particular case, I'm concerned about this zoning ordinance, this language, this light trucks thing, because it doesn't include standards for what is a light truck. The fourth one is just a point for you guys that a Board of Adjustments has limited interpretive authority. So when you guys go to interpret the zoning ordinance, you can't just pick any definition of the terms or any understanding of what they're supposed to mean. You can't like decide, oh, well, this is what we think is best for our community. You only have to interpret the words that are there and what it actually says, okay? And by the way, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit in a minute, but it also has to be interpreted within the framework of the ordinance. And so one of the things I'm going to talk to you about in a minute is this HC zone has a bunch of other uses in it that doesn't have a limitation for just light kind of vehicles like light trucks. It allows any vehicle to be on these other uses, okay? Which is an implication that in the HC zone, it was intended that you could have larger trucks in the HC zone and uses in the HC zone. The absence of a definition, think about this for a minute. If you don't define a term, that can be a bad thing because it could theoretically give the city or the board what's called unfettered discretion. That was a court phrase that was used by the judges down in Frankfurt. Would give a board unfettered discretion to determine what can be allowed or not. Well, obviously that's not allowed. You know, you have to, in the ordinance, you have to actually state what's allowed or not allowed. You can't let a board have unfettered discretion. The next point here is that you're not allowed to interpret in a way where you have to try and guess or indicate what you think the city council meant when they adopted these terms. It has to be in the words. You can't just say, oh, well, the city council might have intended this. If it's not actually in the ordinance, you're not allowed to read it into it. All right? And then the last one is just sort of interesting. One of the cases, and it goes back a while, talks about, like, you guys may remember in the federal Constitution, we had the Constitution, and there's the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments. Kentucky's Constitution that formed our state has the same thing. The Bill of Rights was actually incorporated into the Constitution itself. It actually is first. So instead of added on afterwards, it was actually the first part of our Constitution is the Bill of Rights. And one of the rights in there is the right of acquiring and protecting property. And the courts have said that that's a great and essential principles of liberty and free government, and it's an inherent and inalienable right. And it is actually the constitutional language that creates the first 6 points that I've made here. In other words, this is kind of the core law of where this all comes from. So I give that to you, and like I say, I'll admit to you, it's a little unusual. I've done these kinds of presentations over the years many times and not really quoted constitutional law to a board. This one's a little different because of this lack of a definition of light trucks and what that means to the zoning ordinance. So, all right. I want to talk a little bit about the HC zone. So we want to get into the HC zone. What the HC zone allows is motor vehicle sales and rental, okay? And that's where it has the thing about light trucks in it. We feel like we fit in that. The way the words are written in the ordinance, I want to be real specific about this. It says that you're allowed to have light trucks, comma, such as sport utility vehicles and passenger and cargo vans. It uses the phrase such as, so it says light trucks such as those two things. It doesn't say limited only to SUVs and passenger and cargo vans. It says such as, which means that they are simply examples of what can be a light truck. It's, in other words, it's not limiting, it's examples. When it uses the phrase such as, it doesn't say as opposed to or limited only to. Those are just examples. So the term is light trucks, and those other things, you know, in other words, I don't think it's proper to interpret this to say, well, enterprise, you're not doing sport utility vehicles or passenger and car vans, you're wanting light trucks, so we're not going to allow you to do it. Well, that's not the way it works, because the way this is worded is it's light trucks such as those. It doesn't mean to narrow the definition, it means to give examples of it. The HC zone also allows a car wash, and we will have a car wash. An establishment engaged in cleaning and washing cars or waxing automotive, such as cars, trucks, and vans and trailers. That's included in the HC zone. Note that there is no limitation or restriction on the type or size of trucks. So theoretically, you could have a car wash for 18-wheelers in the HC zone. There's no limitation on what size trucks you can wash. The next one is, in the HC zone, you're allowed to have equipment sales. And it goes on to this big, long description of what kind of equipment sales you can do in the HC zone. Again, there is no limitation or restriction on the size of the equipment that you can have a business selling. So you're allowed to have equipment sales, and the equipment sales could be those big, huge yellow trucks that we see them using for a construction site, you know, like building a new road or something like that, would be allowed in here because there's no limitation on the size of the trucks if you're selling equipment. There is a motor vehicle service major. So by the way, a lot of zoning ordinances have one zone that allows minor car repairs, where if you're just doing smaller stuff, you know, oil changes and that. And then if you want to have more major kinds of auto repair, you may have to be in a different zone. This is that different zone that allows even major motor vehicle service. Motor vehicles, any motor vehicles, including trucks of any size. So I could come in this zone and have motor vehicle service of even 18-wheelers in this same zone that we want to go into. One more. There's a permission or authority in the zone to have off-street parking lots, and there's no limitation on the size of the vehicles that you're allowed to have in an off-street parking lot in the HC zone. My point about that is when we go back to that language I was telling you about earlier, where you guys have to interpret this definition of light trucks in the scope of the overall zoning ordinance and what you can calculate from the definitions that are included in the ordinance, what's permitted. There's a whole bunch of uses within this very zone that allow even 18-wheelers, we're not asking for that, by the way, but allow even 18-wheelers in this particular zone. So to interpret the term light trucks in a zone that allows, in other words, this business, there could be 3 or 4 other businesses around this particular business where even 18-wheelers are coming around, but the city's trying to tell us we're not allowed to have even these box trucks that have all those standards that I mentioned on the sheet that I printed out in blue for you. All right, now I got to read one more thing to you. Sorry about that. Accessory uses. So there are 3, a use can be accessory if it is one of 3 things, any one of these 3, because there's an or. I think we meet all 3 of them. The first one is, and this is, by the way, the truck rental aspect of our business, is subordinate in area, extent, and purpose to the principal use. So if you're that, you can be accessory. Well, clearly, if we're only going to have 6 or 8 trucks, maybe 10 on the lot, and our major use is cars, and we're only going to have a small portion over there in the side where we're going to park the trucks, it is subordinate in area, extent, and purpose to the principal use. So I think it's accessory. The second thing, it can be accessory if it contributes to the comfort, convenience, or necessity of the principal use. The point I'll make about that is I think we comply with that one too, only because the only reason they're doing truck rental is for the convenience of their regular customers who come there and rent cars all the time, that they can also fill the need of renting them a truck. So I think it fits as an accessory use there too. The third one is it's located on the same lot and in the same zoning district as the principal use. Well, obviously this is going to be on the same lot with the enterprise. So I think it meets all 3 of those requirements. All right, the last major point that I want to talk to you about is this industry code things. I don't know if you heard when Mark was reading this. So the new zoning ordinance that they have in Erlanger, with each one of the uses, they identify this industry code, all right? And the industry codes come with either 4 or 6 digits. I'm not real sure why they're different, but they're either 4 or 6 digits, and they refer to this national organization that has a website, all right? And so the website is the NAICS. It stands for help me, Mark, what's it stand for? National Association, Industry Code Standards or something like that? Is that what the NAICS stands for?
North American Industry Classification System.
Like she said. So it's North American Industry Classification System. All right, so the first thing I want to hand out to you guys is the one that regulates this particular zone, the one that is referenced specifically in the zoning code for this particular use. And if you look on about the middle of the first page, it says this industry group comprises establishments primarily, by the way, primarily engaged in retailing new and used automobiles and light trucks such as sport utility vehicles and passenger and cargo vans. All right? Now, an industry group comprises establishments primarily engaged. No question that Enterprise's primary industry is renting and selling cars, not trucks. So when you look at this, we're not excluded by this terminology. And again, going back to that definition of how we're allowed to read into a zoning code, I think that's important, okay? So that's the one that governs us. We feel very comfortable that we fit within that definition. And especially when it's your primary use is something else, and we're wanting to rent these trucks that are a little bigger than what staff feels we should, okay? Now, okay. So staff in their recommendation and in their original decision referred to a NAICS truck rental business, okay? And what they're saying is that this, what I'm about to hand you, this one is the closest match of similar classification what they claim we're going to be doing. And so they want to make us go into this flex industrial zone rather than the HC zone, all right? So the one I'm about to hand you out is the one that says, this is what your staff is saying, this is what our business operates under. And that's, and by the way, it was under your paragraph 10 of their staff report. I want you to keep in mind when we look at this that it's which one of these is the closest to the applicant's use that is applicable here. So this one, again, in the middle of the first page. And by the way, what I did, these are each several pages long. I printed out the entire section when I went to the website so that you had it all. But most of it is that in the middle of the first page, about 2/3 down, it says this industry comprises establishments primarily engaged in renting or leasing without drivers one or more of the following: truck tractors, buses, semi-trailers, utility trailers, or RVs. Does any of that sound like what we've been talking about Enterprise is doing? I don't think so. That's what staff is telling you. This is the one that most closely approximates what Enterprise is wanting to do. And so we're going to deny them the use of this property because this is what that's not, in my opinion, that's not what Enterprise is planning on doing. The last one, you might have heard, and it kind of caught me odd when I heard it the first time. There was a suggestion that we should go into that zone where they talked about the self-storage. So they referred to another industry code, 531130, and this was also your staff has talked about, we need to go into that flex industrial zone or whatever, and the reason for that is that it allows this use, all right? So read with me on the first page about 2/3 of the way down again. This industry comprises establishments primarily engaged in renting or leasing space for self-storage. These establishments provide secure space, i.e. rooms, compartments, lockers, containers, or outdoor space where clients can store and retrieve their goods. Does that sound anything like what Enterprise is doing? On this kind of a use, if you look from the sky down at one of these facilities, most of the lot is going to look like rooftops, and it's going to have some drive aisles between the buildings. On our site, we're going to have mostly a big, huge parking lot with a small building in the middle of it. This is nothing like what Enterprise is proposing to do. So we've got the situation where the zoning code the new zoning code, instead of like just defining terms, they reference these industry standards, these industry code standards, and they say, okay, this is how we're going to try and figure out whether somebody's allowed in a particular zone or not. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. They can probably do that, and it probably in a lot of cases it's going to work. In this particular case, to exclude Enterprise because of the light trucks that they want to rent and saying that we don't fit under 4411 because we should be in a zone that allows those last two, to me is nonsensical. It just doesn't make any sense. That's not what we're doing. That's not our business model. That's not what we do. I'll make one more point to you. This HC zone, when you look through a zoning code, so they have all of their residential zones, they have a bunch of industrial zones, and they have several commercial zones. The HC zone is the highest, all right? So if you go past this, you're looking at some other kind of use because this is the zone that is sort of the catch-all for commercial enterprises that don't fit in one of the other more restrictive zones. So I didn't bother bringing the whole zoning code and I didn't copy it all and hand it to you, but I will just tell you that if you are a property owner, or you want to be a property owner in the city of Erlanger, and you have a commercial use, you're going to go to that and look at it and say, okay, this zoning code down here is real restrictive. This one's a little more liberal. This one's a little more liberal. This was the highest one, the HC zone. We don't fit in any of those first three. We do fit in the HC. That's the highest it can go, all right? And so theoretically, you could be excluding uses from your zoning code altogether if you get to the point where this being your highest commercial zone and you have a commercial use and you're not allowed to even have it in the city anywhere. By the way, you're not allowed to have a zoning code that completely prohibits any use, all right? And just so you know, like, I don't know if you guys have been in any of those seminars, that's the reason why you're not allowed to have a zoning code that doesn't allow what they call sexually oriented businesses. It'd be nice if we could have a zoning code that says, you're not allowed to have any of those in our community. You're not allowed to have that. Well, the same thing here. You're not allowed to have a zoning code that doesn't allow light truck rental in any zone in your city that's a commercial use. And that's essentially, this being the highest of the zones, this is the highest commercial use, okay? All right. Right. I think I'm going to conclude now by making 2 points to you. You sort of have two ways that you can rule tonight that would allow enterprise to come in. One of them is to say, yes, the trucks that they're proposing to use, they're not semis, they're not big trucks, they don't meet any of those standards on that blue sheet on there. They're light trucks. We're going to say that there's not enough definition in the code to prohibit this. They're allowed to do that, and that's the one way that you can say it. The other way you can say it is, look, they're only going to have 6 or 8 trucks on that lot at any time. Maybe someday if their business grows, it might get to 10 or even 20. That's a accessory use to their primary use, which is renting and selling cars, and so it's an accessory use. So I would ask you, if you would, when you go to take action, think about which one of those two might be the best fit for what you guys believe. I'll also say one last thing in closing. As a result of what's happening tonight, I think the city is probably going to have to go back and define light trucks. Okay? I mean, if I was their city attorney, I'd probably say to them, hey guys, we've got this term in here that's kind of vague. We probably need to go and define this term. We're here tonight. We're here looking at a zoning ordinance and an application that has to be decided based on the current zoning code that has the current language in it, which is light trucks and the way accessory uses are defined. And I think we meet that. So we'd ask you for that. Now, I'll also say, I've got 2 people here. I'd be happy to answer any questions myself, and I know they would too. Before I close, any questions that you guys have for me or them?
We appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, just give us a rough idea, when you're talking about box trucks, how big are the boxes and just roughly, please.
I got the truck rental manager with me tonight. Start with your name.
Chris Minnick. They will range from 15 feet to 26 feet for box trucks.
Okay, and they're single axle trucks?
They are.
Okay. All right, just so everyone knows what we're talking about
For sure.
there. Do you happen to know offhand, there's like a 5,500 or, what size those, what?
The equivalent would be a 3,500 up to a 650 or 6,500. So if you're in the Ford range, it would be from a 350 up to a 650. That would be the equivalent. Now that Ford does go all the way up to an 850. We don't rent anything that large.
Okay. Now where does the CDL, do you know offhand?
That starts at 750.
At 750, thank you. Okay, that means that at 750, this weight of truck is where it becomes an all-commercial thing where you have to have a CDL license in order to drive. Okay.
Correct.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Anybody else?
It might be worthwhile knowing one other thing that Chris mentioned to me when we were on the phone the other day. When the trucks are on the lot, when they're coming into the lot, and when they're leaving the lot, they're always empty. A user is going to go and pick up the truck, drive it somewhere, load it, deliver it, bring the truck back when they go to, so the roads around the site and the lot itself and that type of thing, they're never going to have a loaded down truck on the site. They're always empty, which is also kind of makes them lighter, obviously, than if they were weighed down.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Took my question.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
We may have to call on you
Yeah,
here. We're gonna.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would someone like to speak on behalf of? We'll call you guys the neighbors.
My name is Dennis Fessler. I live on Cherry Tree, the second house down from the road that's up where they're gonna do this. So, sitting in my living room every night, and I have tractor trailers coming down the sidewalk. I guess they're avoiding the light or something, bouncing over our little island there, coming down Cherry Tree where the flag is, the flagpole. Familiar with the area?
I'm familiar with that, yeah.
Okay. So the tractor trailers come around there, and they can't get around there, and so they're running over the edge of the traffic island, the curb, and bouncing over that and shaking the whole house. But we just don't want a bunch of trucks there on our street, because, you know, it's a subdivision.
I think now, aren't they coming off of where Houston Road now has a lot more trucks than it did? Isn't there like a cut-through that you're using?
Yeah,
And then-
Rodeo Drive.
Huh?
It's Rodeo Drive.
Okay.
Is the one we're talking about. It's a private road, and it's not for trucks. They're driving through there constantly, loaded down and bouncing over the curb, and, you know, and we had a real nice stone entrance to our Cherry Hill subdivision in between the gas station and the bank, and they took that out when they did all the construction up there, and they promised they'd put it back, and they never did. So that's one thing that's a concern. And then coming down into our subdivision, we don't want to look at a bunch of trucks. So if they got a plan to put them, you know, coming out on the other street, are they going to take the traffic out, coming out of the front there? I mean, we're in the dark. We don't know nothing.
What we're doing tonight
It's,
we don't have any control over where any egress or anything is gonna be of the, you know, the lot or how it's laid out. That's not our function tonight.
right, I
So
understand that.
unfortunately, yeah, I can't really,
That's
Oh.
another meeting.
yeah. But I do understand your plight over there. I have recently been in there and seen where they cut through now off of Houston Road. to
Yeah, they got
avoid
that thing
traffic.
tore up bad.
So,
But, you know, if there was gonna be some kind of, you know, like a row of landscaping or something along there, that would be good. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Just, you know, feel like I'm in the dark. I don't know what they're gonna do. And later on, are they gonna get bigger trucks? I mean, that's another concern.
There shouldn't be anything larger than what we've
Right,
discussed.
I understand that, but I mean, 5 years from now, things could change.
It would have to be rezoned.
Rezone, okay. That's my only concern is my subdivision, you know, and property value going down.
Sure.
That's all.
All right, thank you.
My name's Tim Humphrey. I live at 3517 Cherry Tree. They pretty much answered everything I need to know, but you're talking weight-wise on your trucks, you're talking 12,000 pound or less? So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we're talking
is that
empty
what we're
trucks.
talking, 12 or
Yeah.
less? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as far as, he pretty much answered everything I need to know until we find out how we're gonna route the trucks to get them out. That's all I need to know. I guess like you said, it's gonna be at another meeting. Okay, so yeah, that's when I'll find out what's going on as far as landscaping and everything. Okay, that was all I needed to know.
All right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Did you swear
My
in?
name is Jerry Stout.
Okay.
I live at 3408 Cherry Tree Lane. I have a couple of questions. Barrier. Now, when they put a barrier up, I'm asking for like a landscaping barrier or whatever, so our subdivision don't look like a truck place. I'm asking for that.
Did you,
Is it possible?
it's actually required. Did you happen to see,
I didn't get one of those.
come up here if you will and take a look at this. This is something, I don't think we passed this one around, but that's just kind of an idea of what they're planning on doing. It is required to have landscaping as a buffer around.
But, you know, the trucks just don't like, when you come up Cherry Tree Lane, if you're not seeing a bunch of tailgates of trucks and stuff sitting there. That's one of my concerns.
Okay.
Now, the other concern I would have is, whatever they use for chemical to wash these trucks and everything, will it be EPA approved standards?
It has to be.
Now, what do you consider a light-duty truck? In Kentucky, they have license plates, like if, for an example, if you got a pickup truck, it's got like a 5,000-pound plate on it. Now, what is going to be your limitations when you're saying a light-duty truck?
So they won't be apportioned plates.
I understand it's going to be all over the country.
Yeah, they'll be taxed up to 26,000 pounds. So that's
26,000
not
pounds.
CDL.
Okay, single axle, everything single axle,
Yes, single axle.
okay? How much of effect is it, that's gonna take it all of 35, 33, that lot on Cherry Tree? Okay, is there gonna be an entrance and an exit off of that, out of that lot, or are you gonna come off of Donaldson Highway?
We actually haven't gotten to that level yet, but there are significant limitations. We've talked with Emmy about that, on where we can get into the site. So,
Yeah, I kind of explained before, that's, our purpose isn't the design of it here tonight, it's, just the clarification on the zoning. The zoning's already established, we're just getting an interpretation on it this evening, so. But they are required to, through Mr. Stewart, I'm sure there's some regulations into where they put the entrance and exits and.
Yeah, there's also additional regulations because Donaldson is a state-maintained road, so they have to meet state regulations for any new or existing entrances onto Donaldson Highway. There's a very good chance that the state may take away all of their driveways on Donaldson because they've done that in other parts of the city on state-maintained roads. So they may have to have all of their entrances on Rodeo Drive. Because the state potentially, I don't know what the state's going to rule, but potentially the state could take everything away on Donaldson, especially since I think the state has some plans on redoing Donaldson over the next few years to try to help out with traffic flow going west towards the airport.
West from where?
From this point, from Houston and Donaldson going west towards the airport, the state, I think, has plans to do work on Donaldson Road. And this property may be affected by it. I've not seen any plans by the state. I don't think the enterprise has either, because everything's still up in the air at the state for final plans. But so right now, yes, everything that the enterprise wants to do on this property has to go through me and the state to get approval for any kind of entrances and landscape and everything else that needs to be done on this property. And the ordinance does cover all the landscaping and setbacks and stuff like that, so.
Now, if they would decide, we haven't made that fact yet, if they would decide that they were going to take that and come on Cherry Tree Lane, that would do away with our island completely almost then. The way the island is set up, and as far as coming on and off of Cherry Tree, if they would use that lot 3533 to take out an entrance and exit for any reason, that would take that island out completely then. Or most of all of it.
That would have to be discussed with our Public Works Department, because the Cherry Tree is a local street, which means it's under city maintaining. I don't think the city has any plans on getting rid of that, but that would be in our discussion before permits are issued.
That's why we're here tonight, to discuss this and see what's going to happen, so we know that where we stand as far as what's going to happen with our subdivision and how it's going to look after this company takes that and builds this facility there.
Right. However, at this point tonight, those plans are not detailed enough to make those kind of decisions. We're only here to decide whether the use of doing truck rental meets the intent or does not meet the intent of the ordinance at this point. That's what this board's going to make a decision on. So whether I made my proper interpretation or I did not. So just on the use, the final design of the lot is still up in the air, depending on tonight and even potentially what the state's going to do with Donaldson. But with definitely that island there will be taken into consideration when the plans do come in for my review. I will talk with our Public Works Department and other city staff to see what we want to do with that, or what we can do with that. You can ask questions, I'll call up and see if anything's been brought before us, and then you can have copies of the plans, because once they get here, then it becomes public record. I understand that, but right now, I have a rough sketch of the plan, but this is still very preliminary because they don't know what's going to happen with parts of the property. Tonight being one small component, and the other was what the state's going to do. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what plans are going to come. I don't even know when they're going to come. I mean, it could be next month. It could be a few months. I don't know what there are on their, what they're waiting on tonight to finalize their plans or not. So I don't know when I'm going to see the plans, but you guys are always free to call up to the city building here to see if the plans have been submitted. If they are, then at that point, you are free to come up and get copies of it through the Open Records Act. So you can call me or any of my staff, and you have to fill out some paperwork requesting the records, and once that's done, then you are free to have any of the records. And if you have questions at that point, then I will try to answer them the best I can. But yeah, I will go through everything to make sure it meets not only what the board decides tonight, but what the ordinance says for this development on this property, including all of the entrances and exits and landscaping and everything else. I did not think about that island, but it definitely would be on my checklist now to try to look into it, even now at this point, to see what the city wants to do with it. So that when the plans do come to us, then I'll have a better idea, make a quicker decision, so I'm not forcing them to wait longer to get their plans if they do meet all the regulations. So they can go through the proper due process. So, so most of what your questions are right now are going to have to take place later when plans come to me for final review. As they've mentioned tonight, it's just, they're trying to determine whether I was accurate in my determination whether this use is permitted or not.
One more question, sir.
Yes, sir.
These gentlemen said you're going to have 6 to 8 box trucks per lot. Is that correct? On the whole lot. On the whole lot. That's going to be a fixed number, or could it escalate to 26? It could escalate to 26?
But it could increase over 6 or 8.
Okay. By how much?
Well, the current estimates are that they could see it go to 10. Long term, they could potentially see it go to 20.
So therefore, that whole lot is going to be, there's going to be a lot of trucks sitting on that corner. Is that correct?
Well, okay.
Correct?
No.
No?
Because most of the time, the trucks aren't sitting there. Most of the time, they're rented.
Yes, but they're going to be coming and going.
But they could be coming and
I
going.
understand that.
Right.
But there's a possibility of 20 trucks being on that lot.
Someday.
Yes.
Someday. We try to be straight with them and let them know. Well, I mean, right now, it's been 6 or 8. Their experience has been at 6 to 8 nationwide and other facilities like this. But they know that it could increase. So we try to be straight with the staff when we talk to them.
Well,
That
if
if you go to
we
10,
get that understanding now, that way the board and everybody will understand how they stand, how to vote on this stuff. Let's see. I think that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Mark Rumke. I'm the current owner of the property that's being decided. I wanted to come and say, I really think this is a win-win-win for Erlanger, Enterprise, and myself, if you do allow Enterprise to go forward with this. I've had this property for sale since about 2009, 2010, and we've had deals on the table 5 different times, and not one of them for more money, 4 of them for within 5% of the same amount of money. And we've turned them down because I also own the property behind that, which is the Beacon Center. And Beacon Center is a medical center. It has Activate Healthcare in there. It's got Ross Medical School, and it has Beacon. And having Beacon in your buildings like having Nordstrom in your mall, or for a guy having Bass Pro Shop in your mall. And Beacon has let us know that, you know, being seen from the road is very important. Beacon's a good company to have in your city. Obviously, you know, doctors and medical staff and what's in that medical building bring a lot of income to the city, you know, just from high wages and such. And we've denied the other possible purchasers of this property because 4 of them were hotels, and they'd be 4 or 5-story buildings. You wouldn't be able to see the Beacon Center from Donaldson. And one of them is a truck stop, which I understand would be legal under the highway zoning as well. And, you know, I reached out to Beacon with a truck stop, and they really didn't want to see that in front of them either. So we passed on all those, but it's, you know, it's been 12, 13 years, and, you know, Enterprise is a perfect company to move in there, buy the property. And I'd really like to see Erlanger allow them to do so.
Thank you. Any more questions from anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Emmy Randall. I'm the Assistant City Administrator here at the City of Erlanger. Is there a way to turn this up? Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Emmy Randall. I'm the Assistant City Administrator here at the City of Erlanger. Prior to coming to the city, I served as the Director of Planning and Zoning at Planning and Development Services of Kenton County, so I have a background in zoning administration, zoning interpretation, and in writing zoning code. I was also very involved in the writing of this zoning code that was adopted here recently at the city. So I just have a few comments in support of Mr. Stewart's interpretation on this matter, and he and I did discuss this at length when we received the initial application and the review. So just to speak to some of the comments that were made tonight by Mr. Tyson. Mr. Tyson referred to the issue that there is no definition of light trucks. Certainly it would make this a lot clearer if there were a definition of light trucks available within the zoning ordinance. One of the things that we did look at, excuse me, the FHWA has a classification system for passenger vehicles and for different types of trucks that traverse across the country. And that classification system is referenced within the zoning ordinance within the parking standards. And specifically, it talks about the types of vehicles that are allowed to be in residential areas and those that aren't. Classes 1, 2, and 3 are all single-axle, 4-tire vehicles. When you get up to classification 5, you have 2 axles and 6 tires. So there's actually the box trucks that they're referring to tonight are 2 axles. There's an axle in the front, an axle in the rear, and they are 6-tire vehicles. So that's a classification of 5, which is not permitted in some areas of the city. So while it's not specifically and expressly prohibited within that highway commercial zone, that is the basis of what we determined to be light versus heavy, was that class 5 classification. There were also some comments in the appeal, and Mr. Tyson referred to them this evening, about other uses within the district that would have unrestricted size of equipment or unrestricted vehicles. Those comments are not quite accurate. Every use within the zoning district, including the equipment, sales, and leasing, is required to have all of that equipment stored within an enclosed building. So those uses were not permit the outside storage of large equipment on a site that would be visible to the public. So I just want to clarify that, that point as well that Mr. Tyson made. Excuse me. And then finally, the accessory use. The statement that this use with the box trucks would be an accessory use on the site. One of the things that is referenced in this code, and is very common in just about every code, is that an accessory use needs to be subordinate in area, extent, and purpose to the principal use. While we have heard Mr. Tyson and his client state that there may only be 6 or 8 box trucks on the site, the reality is the site plan that they have shown has parking space for 50 box trucks. And the area shown on the site for the storage of those box trucks, I do not believe would be considered subordinate in area to the area that they have shown on the site where you would store the passenger vehicles. So I think the case could be made that it's not really, while they say there might be 6 or 8 trucks, that's not really what's been submitted and shown on the site. It's a substantial area that would be used for the box trucks. I believe those are the only comments I have. If you don't mind, just let me look through my notes here. Oh, the interpretation of the use category. So Mr. Tyson commented that the interpretation of the use goes back to these NAICS codes, the North American Industry Classification System. This is a classification system that's broadly used in the banking industry and economics industry to classify what types of businesses are. So this is a pretty standard practice. It is new to this zoning ordinance and new to the city to use this as an interpretation. So when we looked at this and looking at the box truck classification, this category, and Mr. Tyson passed this out, truck, utility, trailer, RV, rental, and leasing. This is what we found in the NAICS code to be the best fit for the box truck rental. And when we looked through the zoning ordinance and looked at what was permitted in the zone, the closest fit was this mini warehouse and self-storage units. And the reason that that is the closest fit is the way that the classification system works is you go from, the 53 is a industrial classification. It starts with 5-3 and gets more detailed with each 4-digit or 5-digit or 6-digit NAICS code. So if you go back to the root of that classification system, you're at a 53. So the only use listed in the code that had that 53 was the mini storage, and that was the closest use. A U-Haul, for example, falls under that, and they typically have a lot of these large box trucks on their sites, and that's what they rent mostly. So that was our interpretation on that piece. Do you have any questions?
I don't. Do you?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got a gentleman back here in the back that has a,
How is truck rental the same thing as self-storage? I run self-storage, and it's not the same thing. I mean, there's nothing being stored in these trucks.
Correct. It's not the same literal use, but when you are trying to find the best fit, and that's what the zoning ordinance calls for, is to look for the best fit. It more closely aligns with that use than it does the other use. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Could we have just a couple of minutes to respond to what Emmy said?
Certainly.
Is that right? Okay. I'm just going to make up a couple of points. So one of the most important things I heard from Emmy say early on in her thing is that it's not in the code. We did not define light trucks. That's critical. When you look at that sheet that I gave you about the legal standards, the fact that it's not defined is really, really important. So you just heard an admission from your city staff that we didn't define this. They probably will going forward, but they have not done it yet. It's not defined. The second thing is the last thing she said, the best fit. This is nothing like mini warehouse. I don't know how they can say that the best fit for the operation that Enterprise plans to do is a mini warehouse. That just doesn't make any sense. Then the last thing, I want to have Jennifer come up. That point about the 50 parking spaces is flawed. I just want to make sure that Jennifer explains to you why the plan looks that way. So Jennifer, you want to do that?
Thank you. So the site plan, as Tim had mentioned before, was just our initial what could fit on this lot. And I mentioned in discussions with the city before, the reason we show the larger 50 parking spaces for truck is because the car rental and truck rental share parking. And we have the flexibility to have the large parking spaces, but that's going to have cars and trucks. That, again, we will have maybe up to 10 trucks, 6 to 8 is regular on the box trucks is what's going to be there. As to the point about the accessory use, to us it is 100% an accessory use. When you look at that picture that you see of the site, the car sales takes up 60% of the parking lot, 60% of the building, the truck rental 20%, car rental about 20% as well. When you look at truck rental on its own, 75% of their transaction are pickup trucks and cargo vans, and the other 25% are these box trucks that we're talking about. It is something we can't separate. Our truck rental either rents both or they don't rent. Erlanger is a place we have wanted to come in and be a part of your community for a really long time. Right now, we hear from our customers for truck rental and car sales that they have to cross the bridge to come to us for those divisions, and this is a corner that we think really works well. We've been very considerate of thinking of could we fit into the community because we know your residence is there. We do think that we can. Our transaction is light use. When you look at hotels or other big establishments, we don't have a lot of transactions that come through. We really feel like this is a good fit. And because we're a family-owned business, been around since the 50s, still run by the same family, we care about what it looks like. They care about what it looks like. We won't hurt your property values. This will be a beautiful site. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
We have two sketches here. We have the first sketch that was given to us that shows the property. Is this correct? We have this drawing here. I see no way how this can fit into this, the way the roads are drawn. Now, is this just a picture of another establishment? Now, how are we supposed to know how these buildings are going to fit on this property with this sketch?
Again, I want to mention that we are not here to determine.
I'm sorry?
We're not here to determine that this evening. That's the design of this is not what our function is this evening. We are here to determine the interpretation of the building code, whether this can be allowed or not. As far as the design and how this is going to be, that's going to be done at a later date. Like Mr. Stewart had mentioned, when the plans are available, he'll make them available to you. You'll be able to come up here and review them and express anything that you have to Mr. Stewart and his staff. Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify one of the legal issues.
Yes, sir.
If you all turn to page 2 of the document that Mr. Tyson handed out, Mr. Tyson is making a big issue as it relates to light trucks not being defined in the ordinance, that somehow that is a automatic loss for the city. And I think that certainly the planning director, as is indicated in this Harrison-Silvergrove case, or in our case, Mr. Stewart and Ms. Randall, have the right to interpret words that aren't defined. And if you look here in this Harrison versus Silvergrove case, which was cited by Mr. Tyson, it specifically states that the Board of Adjustments did not exceed its authority when it accepted the planning director's definition of a tourist home where the zoning ordinance provided no definition. It must do so, however, within the framework of the ordinance. The planning director had the authority to interpret the zoning ordinance within the framework of the ordinance. So I would just bring to the board's attention that Mr. Stewart and Ms. Randall have interpreted light trucks within the framework of that ordinance. Now, it's certainly up to the board to make a determination whether under KRS 100.257 that Mr. Stewart has erred in his interpretation. But the lack of definition within the zone, I think pursuant to Harrison versus Campbell County, which was cited by Mr. Tyson, is not in itself a problem.
Go ahead, Mr. Podium, please.
I'm going to clear up something. That case is cited to support the principle that you have to look at the entire zoning code as a whole, and you can't interpret it based on one line when it doesn't, when there's not a definition in there. There's other cases that talk about the requirement of a definition, and you can't interpret it broadly. You have to interpret it narrowly. What's important about that case is the reason why I talked about there being so many different uses within the HC zone that allow 18-wheelers. One of the things you heard them talk about, when I think was the first comment that was made, is we don't want 18-wheelers coming up and down our street. If any one of those other HC uses that I mentioned earlier ends up on this site, it complies with zoning, and they could have 18-wheelers coming up and down their street. The one nice thing about this enterprise project, it'll get this property developed, and they'll never have 18-wheelers going in and out of the site. All right? So I think that's, Jack, and I have a lot of respect for Jack, by the way. Jack is right. That case in and of itself doesn't address the issue of defining a term in a zoning ordinance. What that case does say, though, is you got to look at the zoning ordinance as a whole. And when you look at those 3 different industrial codes that I handed out to you, and you look at those other HC uses that are permitted in the zone, when you look at the zoning code as a whole, I think the term light truck, the trucks that they rent they fit within that definition when you look at the overall code. So I just want to clear that up with you.
Thank you. Anything else? From the audience? Okay, we'll close the discussion. Any questions, gentlemen? I think we need a motion's in order. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the appeal of the zoning administrator's decision interpretation of Ms. Jennifer Hendricks' request to allow small to medium-sized box truck rentals for the following reason. I don't believe that it doesn't clearly define the term light truck. I believe the term light truck is too vague in this, and I move to approve.
Okay, the motion has been made to approve allowing Enterprise to come in due to the fact that the definition of the light truck wasn't clearly outlined. So now we need a second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Sorry. Mark will call you.
Mr. Betas?
Aye.
Mr. McVeigh? Aye. Mr. Conley?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your patience tonight, too.
I think you guys made quite a valid point.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming out on
been a little bit of a confusion about when this was going to be this week, that's for certain.
Well, and they accommodated tonight because the other date that they appointed, we couldn't make it, so they moved it from, I think it was like last Wednesday to tonight, so we
See,
appreciate you.
we are an accommodating city. Thank you.
By the way, I'll also tell you guys, just so you know, we've got a really good staff here. Mark and Emily did a great job. They were very open in their meetings, and we talked it all through. It's simply a, respectful disagreement over the term and what it is, so.
We try not to let them know that. We don't want to go to their.
They might be wanting to raise.
Thank you. Okay, we motion to adjourn? I'll go. And second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Adjourn.